Rickey Gevers, welcome to the podcast.
Gevers.
Gevers. Rickey Gevers.
Yeah, only Dutch people can pronounce
I know. Damn it. Next time. We have a mutual friend, Dennis, and I'm gonna butcher this too. Dennis Nuyens. Almost. Anyway, we have a mutual friend, Dennis. Shout out to Dennis. Very lovable guy. Knows everybody in the world, at least in the Netherlands.
Absolutely.
And I asked him last time I saw him. I said, "Who should I have on the podcast?" And you were one of his top 3. And he said that you are the man for incident response and negotiations.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to
That's
have you here
correct.
today. But for the world that doesn't know Dennis or you, why don't you start with a brief introduction to yourself?
I'm Rickey Gevers.
Nice.
I've always been into computers, not necessarily my main topic, but I've always been busy with computers, and you can see that throughout my entire career, I think. So I started a little bit with hacking, then started to do some forensics, and I ended in incident response. I'm a programmer as well, so I think I touched all of the topics, and that's very handy, I think, during incident response. I've been involved in some large incident response cases. Shamoon is a very good example of that one. For the Dutch people, we've had ASML and the Chinese hacking their company, which was a big case. And these days, it's mainly ransomware, unfortunately. So,
I have a question for you. What is VorNemming? It looks like a bunch of like plants or something.
yeah, it's an observation website. So if you translate it, it's observation.nl. And I've built that website when I was 14, I think. And it's one of my first websites. That website got hacked, and that's how I got into hacking as well.
No way.
Yeah. And the funny thing there is that put a lot of effort and time into that project. It worked well. A lot of people were using it. And one day, one guy hacked it, and I felt so bad about that. That's something like as simple as that could happen to me, and I didn't understand at all what was happening. So I wanted to learn how that works, and it turned out that I was pretty good at hacking myself eventually. But the website itself, if you see a bird, for example, a rare bird, you can put it on the website there, and you can share it with other people. That's the whole deal of the website, and you can see all sorts of sightings there.
Okay, that's so funny that's actually what got you into hacking. I just thought it was funny topic to start out with because I just saw a bunch of birds. I was like, "Are you some sort of naturist or something?" But so wow.
Yeah.
And you were 14 when that happened.
Yeah.
What did you do with the website, by the way? He just.
I sold it eventually.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I sold it for €1,000.
Nice.
Yeah.
Big sum if you're 14.
Yeah, I sold it at 16, I think,
Okay.
and then €1,000 was a lot
still
of
a
money.
big sum, yeah.
I still remember it till that. And you know what I did with that money? I bought a computer.
Nice. Solid.
Yeah.
Probably a nice computer at that point then.
Yeah, a very good
For that
computer for
time,
the time.
yeah.
Especially for that age.
Yeah,
as
right.
well.
So you've been literally doing investigations ever since somebody hacked your website when you were 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then
I wanted to become a digital cop.
cool. Yeah, because then I see you went to an internet service provider, and then you went to digital forensic investigator, Bitdefender, and
Yeah.
today you are the co-founder or the founder,
Yeah.
one of the two, of Responders.
Both, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, responders.
Cool. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a friend of mine, we've always been working together at these different companies, and we've always simply liked incident response the most. We've been doing incident response for those company, but we've always had some sort of our own vision. And at one point in time, we just thought, well, now it's enough. Let's just do it ourselves now. And that's how we started this company. And we sort of jumped in a gap in a sense that we just started with it, and we'll see wherever we end. And we've been working since day one. So we didn't have a single day of no work. So everything went pretty well.
Unfortunately for the world, that's kind of how it is, I guess, huh? Ransomware.
Yeah, that
Is it mostly ransomware that you're dealing with, or?
Yeah, unfortunately these days it's mainly ransomware, and the main reason is, of course, if you have an APT, you won't see it because they're simply spying and not breaking down the system. And ransomware, as soon as they roll out the ransomware, you're gonna find out, and that's when people call us.
Interesting. Well, hey, I have a lot of questions for you today. I know that you're a good guy. Dennis confirms that, and you have a great reputation. I want to ask some questions that are maybe sort of what do you say? Uncomfortable. I mean, it's the whole concept of paying ransom or not paying ransom and incident response situations. I mean, sometimes companies feel like they are forced to pay, I guess, since they deem the alternative to be much worse, right?
Exactly.
I don't know. Do you have any introductory thoughts around that sort of whether to pay, not to
Yeah.
pay sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, if you look at it from an ethical perspective,
Mm.
you never want to pay a criminal, in a sense that if you pay a criminal, you keep the business running. And that's something we don't want.
Mm.
So in theory, if you never pay for ransomware, ransomware will die out. But that's the theory. That's not what's going to happen in practice, because ransomware is simply some form of crime, and crime will always be there. There will never be a day in our lives that there's no crime. So that being said, if you never want to pay, that would also mean that you're going to sacrifice some companies. And I can tell you one thing, that if you on your own build a company for, let's say, 10 or 20 years, and then one cybercrime guy comes along and ransomwares your company and asks you for, let's say, 10,000 euros, you're going to pay it. You're not going to throw away your whole life working for this company, building this company. You're not just going to throw that away. That's simply what reality is. And I think it's for us even better to simply accept that there's a certain level of crime, and it's probably better to be able to deal with this crime rather than to stop this crime. I think we should fight crime on a different level, in the sense that you can't ask companies to sacrifice themselves for the greater cause. And that's what you're doing when you ask a company not to pay the ransom.
Right.
And it's very debatable. It's a hot topic at this moment. In practice, we used to see a lot of companies paying. Nowadays, it's getting a little less, and the main reason is that most companies do have good backups at these days. One of the other things that you see right now is that they steal. So it's double extortion. They steal data as well. So sometimes we have companies that do have proper backups, but still pay for the ransom because they don't want that data to end up on the dark web. It's not really the dark web, but it ends up somewhere in the internet, and people download it and people view it. And another interesting thing is that what we are witnessing is it's a pretty clear picture. If you do something, or if you ransomware a government or a public institution, let's put it that way, then it's usually not the data of that company itself. So it's our data, basically. Let's put it that way. And those companies usually don't pay. So if it's a government entity, usually they simply don't pay. If it's a multinational where you have a board of people that's somehow changing, so after 4 years you get a new director, those kind of things, you see that they, I guess in half of the times or something, they pay the ransom. And if you have a family company, so a very old company, they often pay. And the main reason they pay is because they value the data of their customers.
Yep.
So for example, you can have what example shall we make? We have a beer brewery, a very old beer brewery.
Yes.
So they have their static clients, and the owner is very familiar with those clients because his dad has been working with those clients. He's now working with those clients. They got ransomware, data got stolen, and that means that a lot of passports of all of their clients got stolen, and they are going to end up on the internet now. So the beer brewer wants to pay in order to make sure that those passports of his clients do not end up on the internet. While at public service, we often see that they simply say we're not going to pay the criminals, and all of those passports end up on the internet eventually. So it's sort of how do you call it, a customer care that those companies are delivering. And I think it's a good thing because once those passports are online, they're going to be all over the internet, and it's the end user that has the big problem, and not the public services. So it's, in my opinion, it's debatable. Another thing is the main reason how we look at it is we simply look at the numbers, in the sense that Sometimes you have companies that if they're standing still for one day, they're losing like 1 million a day or something, and the ransom is only 100,000. Well, then it's simple math, in my opinion. Then you'd rather pay instead of losing 1 million every single day. So that's another perspective, how you can look at it. And we've had some cases, for example, with companies as well, where they chose not to pay and eventually ended up paying like around 10 million, while the ransom was only 10k. But they simply wanted to make a stance and never pay to criminals. I think, in my honest opinion, that's a really good stance. But on the other hand, you're losing a lot of money.
Yeah, it's commendable, but it's not the best economically, I guess.
Exactly. And we are helping individual clients, and we are not helping the world. So we look at the benefits of the individual client. Sometimes paying is the route they take.
Yeah. Well, a lot of very interesting things you just said there. One of the things I want to ask you about is the double extortion part. Have you ever seen in any of your cases that they actually do release the data anyway, or keep? Because
no.
Okay, so they actually.
I've never seen that.
Wow.
No. I am familiar with stories that it ended up somewhere else, but I'm only familiar with one story, and I wasn't there myself, so I'm not able to verify that. But I haven't seen that myself.
What about the other? At the very beginning of this whole ransomware thing, they were saying if they're not going to encrypt your files anyway. Is that still the case, or is that they do decrypt them and they're good at that point?
Yeah, that's the same. I've never had a case where they didn't provide a decryptor. I do had one case where the decryptor was not working properly.
Yeah.
So not all of the files could be decrypted. But it's only been in one single case. What sometimes all of the groups have different decryptors. Some decryptors work better than the others, so that's tough. But we have a pretty good overview of all of the groups that are around there, and we know what you can expect when you get a certain decryptor, and also how reliable those guys are. What I sometimes think is funny is that once they've stolen data, they will provide us with a movie of the deletion of the data. Well, in practice, that's not very good proof, of course, but it's still funny that you received that.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's a business model, and I can tell you that if I come across a ransomware group that doesn't stick to its business model, I will bring it out there. So I will let all of the other incident responders know that this group is not reliable, of course, and that will make sure that if they ever want to make profit in the future, it will go down, of course.
How many groups do you think you've dealt with over the years?
I think around 20 or 30.
20 or 30. Do you think they know who you are? Do you do you have your own reputation from their side?
No, I don't think they. We make a specific tactic for every single case that we have. So we literally build a new one for every single case. And one of the points we usually use is that we never tell them who we are, because once they know who you are, they probably know what they can ask as well. And I don't think that will benefit us.
No.
So usually we play dumb in that case.
Yeah.
We won't let them know, but it completely depends, of course.
And do you rely? I don't really know much about negotiation, especially in these sort of cases. But do you use normal methods in negotiation? I know you have some special ones that I'm not going to ask you your secret sauce, but it is read a negotiation book and kind of follow those tactics sort of thing, or is it totally different world?
Yeah. Now the funny thing was in the beginning when we realized that you can make a lot of profit from the company side. Let me put that clear as well. As soon as we found out that the negotiation is a very valuable part, because we're technical people, we want to tend to focus at least on the technical perspective. But at one point we realized that, let's say the ransom was 300k, you pay for the incident response, all of the people there 100k, and that means that you're going to pay 400k. But if we take down that number from 300k to 100k, you save your customer 200k. So that's a lot of effort while simply chatting. So that's when we realize we should focus on that chatting as well, because it's a very easy way to get the numbers down at least. So in the beginning we thought, let's look at the traditional way of negotiations. So we bought some books, we read some books, we investigated that, and we thought those tactics would work in practice for ransomware as well. And we quickly realized that none of those tactics actually works. It's a completely different game.
It's a different game.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any things that you do you know why that is, or is it just like it's you're dealing with
Yeah,
criminals?
the
or whatever,
stakes
and
are
it's like-
different.
Yeah.
I think the main difference is that you have a criminal that is on the safe side. In the other negotiation steps, you have the person physically there, and usually there's even people pointing guns at his face. So that's a completely different set than when a criminal somewhere in the world is sitting behind his keyboard who's totally safe.
Right.
I think those two mindsets are the biggest difference, and that's what we should play upon. And the traditional tactics usually focus on that person that doesn't want to be there because his life could end in a few moments. Well, for a ransomware case, that's obviously not the case. This person is safe. You can use a lot of tactics, but he won't really get afraid of you.
But it's interesting. I mean, like, if you're, they have your data. They have data, somebody's data, and they want your money. They want money at the end of the day. But if you don't pay them immediately, they might not get that money. So there is like, they also have even though they're safe, there's a dynamic. They have skin in the game at that point too, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. I'm not gonna tell all of the secret sauce,
of course.
But that's one of the points. One of the first things that you should make sure that you know is what they know, so what their position is, and from that perspective, you're going to see what your chances are and how you could start this game as well. So if you're going into it in an aggressive way, if you know they have nothing and you have nothing to lose, etc., or if they basically have the keys to the kingdom and they got everything and you're gonna be bankrupt if you're not gonna make a deal.
Thank you for sharing.
So that's all tactics.
Yeah, super interesting. When you get into a situation where your client, the client is just like, okay, we have to unlock, we have to pay this. We don't have any other choice, right? That's we got to do that. What sort of troubles do they run into then? Like, what sort of challenges do they face once they made up their mind? Because I'm assuming that probably takes the longest for them to decide whether to pay it or not, right? That's like what takes the longest time, or.
Yeah, it's always different, of course. Sometimes you have clients that know within 4 hours, in a sense that they know we don't have backups, we're losing 10 million a day right now, we need to fix it ASAP. Then they that they're simply going to pay as quickly as possible. In other cases, you have a customer that wants some time, that wants to buy some time in order to check whether the backups are good, for example. In other cases, you have clients that simply don't want to pay, so they want to. You have a certain negotiation period, like 2 or 3 weeks, depends on the group, of course. But they want to inform their clients, for example. So they want, as soon as the ransomware group publishes their data, it's out there in the public, so a journalist could be writing about it. But some customers want to inform their clients prior to the news release. So then you're just going to chat with them and keep them online for 3 weeks in hope that your client's able to inform their customers in time. But it totally depends on the case, and usually you already know pretty quickly what the tactic is going to be.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it's usually one of those three. So either they know directly they're going to pay, they know they're going to need some extra time in order to make sure if they need to pay or not, or they're not going to pay.
Actually, I want to go back a little bit. Like, when they're deciding, are you, when those like sort of decisions are going on, are you like sitting there in the room with them, or are you letting them figure that out on their own?
No, depends on the case. I prefer to be there in the room as well. So we have a certain set of questions in order for those customers to make up their mind, so they know where they're standing. We're going to use those questions as well for our tactic. But it's very important. You often have emotional clients, and the first thing you should do is always get the emotion out of the game. And that's pretty hard for some people, but that's one of the main things that we do as soon as we start. We're going to tell them our experience. Usually that already cools it a little bit down. Sometimes you have those people that are in fighting mode, so they want to say a lot of aggressive things in the chat. Well, I can assure you that's not a good tactic to do. Well, that's the main part. Cool down the whole team and then make a rational decision about what you're going to do.
Interesting. And then, like, when you say chat, they just like open up some sort of Telegram thing that you chat with them on?
No, usually they have their own portal where you have a chat screen. So like some sort of help desk. That's what people often compare it. As soon as you log in into that screen, you often see already the demand, so the amount of money they're asking. Sometimes you simply start a chat, and in a few cases you have email addresses where you can contact them.
Mm.
And then you're simply going to email those guys.
Mm. And there's usually, when they're deciding and you're going through this, there's like probably lawyers in the room. There's probably like management, and then in your experience, who's usually calling the shots in those rooms? Whose voice is loudest?
It depends. I usually have as less people as possible in the room.
Really? Yeah.
Because if you have too many opinions, it's a little bit distracting.
Yeah.
So often it's the CEO. Sometimes you have the CFO sitting next to it, and sometimes you have lawyers there as well. But it's usually I prefer at least to have only the CEO there, and of course, as the bigger the company gets, the more people. But the best thing is to have as less people as possible, and it's often the CEO that's at least in the best position to determine what this company can afford to pay, for example. And if you have people in a little bit lower positions, they usually want to pay a lot less, of course.
Yeah.
Well, you should simply have all stakes on the table in the sense that you know what it's worth to pay.
And I mean,
and where you're standing.
In most of these situations, they're not asking for something that's like can't be paid. Like, of course, that money's there. It's just, I guess they're thinking about like, okay, is our reputation going to be so affected by this, or so it's not. That's not usually the money itself, though, is it?
Usually not, but sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes you have groups that are, I think, simply not properly informed. So they ask these weird amounts. Let's say you have a one-man company and they ask several hundreds of thousands of dollars. Doesn't make sense at all, of course.
Yeah.
The customer can never pay that. In other cases, you have, and that's usually when you have a multinational or an extremely large company. That's the ones that get into the news as well, where they ask, for example, $150 million. The weird thing is that sometimes they ask that money, but as far as I know, those extremely large amounts never get paid because it's simply way too much.
That's way too much, yeah.
Yeah, and I think from a perspective from the cyber criminal side as well, it's probably not a good tactic because you scare them away directly, and it's very easy for those guys then, for the CEO at least, to say, "Well, this doesn't make sense a lot. We're not gonna pay," and then it's a done deal. So there's no negotiation part there as well. Then.
Yeah, right.
They're simply not gonna pay then.
Yeah, there's a little ego involved on both sides of this, I guess.
Exactly.
Huh? And that's your job to not have
ego.
the ego. You're just there to inform and make cool down the situation.
Yeah, a rational and very informed decision, and it's the quickest way to the end. Sometimes you also have cases where a person or a company could eventually not pay, for example, in the sense that they have good backups, they can get back online pretty quickly, but you simply do the math. So if you make a deal with those ransomware criminals, you make sure that they tell you how they got in, which makes sure that the incident response trajectory is also a lot smaller. If you have a large team sitting there, that spares you a lot of dollars as well. They delete the data, and you make all sorts of deals there in order to get the incident response time as short as possible, and the amount that you eventually pay, whether it's to the cyber criminals or to the incident response team, as small as possible as well. So you get the job done for the least amount as possible and as quickly as possible as well.
Interesting. What sort of how does it go? Okay, you're gonna pay the hackers now. Do you go buy Bitcoin, or do you buy, what's another coin that's super? Are there any coins these days that are actually untraceable, or is
Yeah, you have the privacy coins.
Yeah,
there's a lot of privacy coins. Sometimes they ask Monero,
Monero,
which is the main privacy coin. Yeah. And you get a discount if you pay in Monero. But in practice, I've never paid in Monero. I've always used Bitcoin. Nothing else.
Why is that?
It's always been the preferred way eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have trouble procuring Monero or something, or do you?
No, that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, yeah. You're just paying Bitcoin because that's just the easiest to...
Yeah, we never had a case where the discount in Monero was significant or something. So that eventually that never happened.
Yeah, and
now I'm not seeing them asking in Monero now these days. They used to do it back in the days, but not anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's only Bitcoin.
Do you think that's because they got better at what do they call it, whitewashing their money or whatever?
Yeah, I think they were simply a little bit afraid in the beginning and just thought, let's switch to a privacy Bitcoin, and I think in practice we can fix Monero, of course, but I think a lot of other teams can't fix Monero, and that's, I guess, why they stick to Bitcoin at the end, because everybody should be able to get some Bitcoin somewhere.
Yeah, right. And if you don't mind me sharing, like, what's the process from your side for procuring Bitcoins and all that sort of stuff?
We streamlined the whole process. So in theory, if a company comes to us and wants to pay right now, we can make sure that within 4 hours those Bitcoins are out there, including the transaction time, the paying for it, etc. So in theory, we could have the decryptor within 4 hours. If it's above 2 million, it's going to take a little bit longer to get the amount of Bitcoins. What you see in the news is a lot of those where they ask above several millions of dollars. In practice, we don't see that often. And even if they do ask several millions, you end up paying not several millions, but a lot less.
Yeah. Cool.
So it's pretty rare to come above a few million.
Interesting. And then
2 million. Even.
Yeah. So you and all that is done through you and your company, and not through the company itself, correct?
No. Yeah. So we do all of it in the sense that you pay us. We make sure that the Bitcoins are there. As I said, we streamlined the whole process. So we make sure everything goes really quickly and you get your company back online as quickly as possible.
Have you ever had any troubles on your side with doing that process?
We used several exchanges, and we've had some trouble with several exchanges. Now we have a preferred exchange, let's put it that way, where we don't have any problem. It's usually the American companies that I don't know what they do, but I assume they somehow see that a transaction has been a ransomware transaction, or they see that it's being whitewashed or whatever. But we've had several cases where we made some transactions and they somehow picked out exactly those transactions where we had to prove that we were the ones paying that amount of money.
Okay.
So I think they have some statistics or whatever where they can find out that it's not totally clean where the money went.
Yeah. Okay. So then they make you go out of your way to prove it, though.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. We simply it's like the KYC in the sense that we have to tell what happened, tell exactly what happened there, deliver some proof that it was actually us paying that amount of money, etc.
And then they let it go, though.
And then they let it prove it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Luckily, I've never had a problem with that.
You've never personally ran into any legal issues, huh? Responders?
No.
And
no, luckily not yet.
And I guess not your. I mean, I'm not sure. As of the 13th.
It's getting tougher. It's getting absolutely tougher.
Yeah. Right.
Especially what's happening in Ukraine right now, and I can imagine that one day there's going to be more trouble with it. But for now, we've never had any problems. So.
And your clients though, because I mean they're paying at the end of the day. Have you ever and your clients ever gotten in trouble?
No.
None of them. Okay.
No.
So that's the legal world's
yeah,
trying to
but
figure
I
out
can.
what to do,
You have the sanction list.
Yeah.
So that's especially relevant for American companies. Most clients of us are from Europe here, and especially the Netherlands. So here it's not the case, but I can imagine that at a certain point in the future, if there's certain sanction lists, that there could be some trouble there. And if you look at the legislation in America, they're trying to do a lot of things as well. So legislation there could change as well. But those are things that we're focused on, and we'll make sure everything goes well the way it should be.
So once that payment is made and you get like confirmation from their side, then they start doing whatever's promised from their side, right? How long does the process go from then? Once you send the money to them and they start decrypting the files.
Usually instant.
Yeah, goes that quickly, huh?
Yeah, usually they're very happy to receive the money.
Yeah.
And they want to get rid of it, so they send all of the information directly, and usually it's done then.
Yeah.
I've even had some cases where we paid the money and the transaction was not even confirmed, and they already sent us the details. So in theory, I could even cancel the transaction and get everything for free. That's not what we're gonna do, of course. But in theory, that could be done. That simply shows how much they trust us, and they're simply waiting for the transaction to happen. Deliver us the data.
And then do they ever? I've heard on the other podcast that like they've after that process is done, they actually like send you information like how they got in, or have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's part of the deal. We make sure that
cool.
it's not a simple deal in that sense.
Yeah.
So if there's some questions from our customers that we want to know, we make sure that those questions will be answered by those guys and are part of the deal. And we also make sure that those groups stick to the deal, of course. So if we're missing something, we're gonna contact them as well. And so that's how we get all of the information. And exactly what you say. Somehow they're a little bit proud often how they hack those companies, and they're often happy to share that information how they get in.
Yeah, and I would assume, or like the way they got in. If you have any, do you have any thoughts around that? Like, is there any like, yeah, well, how do they usually get in? If you look at all the incidents, is it just the normal stuff you normally hear about, or?
But it's usually what they call phishing. That means that you get an email with an attachment. It could be a VBA script or a zip file or whatever, and that's, I think, in probably 80% is that the case. It's switching month to month as well. So sometimes you have a certain vulnerability that's public, so they use that vulnerability. They use leak credentials as well, but those are the main three things, I think.
Leak credentials, phishing, and you said vulnerabilities.
Yeah, vulnerabilities, so public vulnerabilities. And what you see with those vulnerabilities, they're limited in the amount of time that you could use them, so it's only a few months that you have the public exploits, and then those die out. But I think probably 80% are the emails with attachments. Yeah, that part.
And then you obviously
the credential stuffing is something that's ongoing for a few years already, but it's not most cases. So I guess 5 or 10% or something.
And then you as responders, I'm sure you have like a follow up with that client to make sure that those things actually get handled, or addressed after the fact, or is that at that point you're out of the door?
Yeah, usually we're out of the door actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we help those clients get back online as quickly as possible, and we make sure that other people take over the service, or the monitoring service or whatever.
Yeah.
But we are simply just there for the incident response, so only during that incident, and we want to go away as quickly as possible as well.
Yeah.
In order to serve other clients that way. And what we see in practice is that there's different routes that those clients take. So usually it's building a completely new network from scratch, or it's just getting the hacker out and basically closing your network a little bit more, making sure it's safe. But that involves like a SOC or monitoring or whatever, and that's those things we don't do. So we make sure they get other partners that fill in that gap.
Interesting. Do you have any other? My head is just. Do you have any closing thoughts or advice or anything you want to say to the listeners out there?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest way to keep those guys out of your network is using two-factor authentication. And unfortunately, in practice, you hardly see companies using two-factor authentication everywhere. And I guess that's the easiest way to make sure those ransomware guys simply won't come in.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about all the clients you've had, do a lot of them have security monitoring service? Do they have like a SOC service? Do you see that having any effect?
At the moment we come in, they don't. But as soon as we go out, they have.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, no, so it's hardly ever a company that has a SOC.
Yeah.
So a dedicated monitoring system. Sometimes they have their own SOC, but usually they don't. So my next advice would be to get a professional SOC,
look into that
network monitoring tool at least. You need somebody to look at the alerts that pop up, and not somebody that looks at them once a week.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Rickey, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insight. It's extremely interesting.
Thank you.
So, I was gonna say, unfortunately, you're gonna have lots to do in the years moving forward, but yeah. Thank you so much again for your time.
That's how it is.
That's how it is. Yeah, and I'm glad
Thank
that you exist.
Yeah.
Take care, Rickey.
Luckily, yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.